Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Dr. A. Today, I talked to Dr. Jadrian Wooten at Penn State University. It's an exciting conversation where we talk about how he teaches 700 student courses, the importance of mentorship and co-authorship, how he developed the successful Econ media library, and how he manages to read, get this, 80 plus books a year. So sit back, enjoy this conversation, grab a cup of coffee, use the chat function if you're watching this live, and let's get to know Dr. Jadrian Wooten. Jadrian, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited about this conversation. Uh, Over the past year, you've kind of had what I consider a crazy academic successful year, and I am interested in learning more about the back end of it. But before we get into my questions, the thing that I want to ask is, how do you want the world to know you?
Yeah, I thought about this, and this is always the part that is the hardest one for me to come up with because I think I've started to accept how other people have already judged me.
Hmm.
I think I've turned into the econ media person, the one that is like, if you have any questions about any TV show, how to use it in class, how I'm using it in class, I think that's really I've jumped into that.
Yeah.
Whereas I think if you had asked me that 3 years ago, it wouldn't have been. I think 3 years ago I was the come up with an innovative way to teach kind of person, and I think I've kind of steered away from that. And now I'm the one who's like, how can I use this TV clip in a cool and creative way? So I think I'm okay with that now. I've accepted that as who I am.
So was it you're insinuating that it was a challenge initially to accept it?
It was because I didn't want to do that, right? So like I think I graduated from Washington State, and I come out as a fresh PhD student. I'm like, I'm going to be a researcher, and I'm going to take this very seriously, and then it turned, right, and then it turned into teaching pedagogy, and then I was like, okay, well, I don't want to narrow my teaching pedagogy stuff, and then all of a sudden I just kept getting deeper. Like, I guess I didn't realize how specific you get when you get out of grad school uh, into like a very niche field.
Yeah, and that is similar to what happened to me, and I had a similar story to what you're pointing out. Is your initial inclination is to fight that, right? Because
Yeah.
and it might be the academic environment that we're in or the training that we receive, but this whole idea of being a great economic educator or specializing on that aspect is kind of it's a notch down in the perception of the market. I don't think so. But initially, I wanted to fight it, and actually, I think I had this conversation with you a couple of days ago in one of our meetings. Is this year, I was like, this is what I do really well. Let me lean into it, right? But it took me. This is year 11 out of grad school, so for 11 years, I fought it. But
Yeah, I think I was telling somebody about this. I don't remember who that. Even to this day, I think I'm 7 years out now. I still don't call myself an economist. If somebody
okay,
were to ask me like, what's your job? Like, economist is not the first thing that comes to my mind. And then I sit here and I go, I have a PhD in economics. Like, I am an economist.
yeah,
But in my mind, it's economic educator. Like, that's the first one. And then I start thinking about like, okay, I'm an educator. Then I'm an economist, and I kind of work my way down. But coming out of grad school, I didn't have that same mindset.
yeah. So now you're fully embrace the economic educator title. And
Yeah.
what was your academic path?
And I never think that I'm that interesting. I'll say I have a different path. So I started undergrad, went to Sam Houston State University. I thought I was gonna own my own restaurant. Like, I was convinced, like, I have an entrepreneur. Yeah, I have an entrepreneur minor. I have a management undergrad. Was really kind of where I started, and then I was a junior. I think I'd taken like an intermediate course. I was tutoring for the department. Like, I was kind of starting to get involved, and then I realized I really liked teaching. Absolutely loved it. I was tutoring other students, and then it kind of like sank in where I was like, oh, I want to do this profession.
Okay.
But I didn't want to teach high school, and so I was like, okay, I want to teach college. And so I was kind of like figuring it out. And then like in that moment, I was like, oh crap, that means I need a PhD.
Yeah.
So I see some of my students who come in and they're like, they know immediately that they want to get a PhD. And I'm like, I didn't even know what that was until I was 20. And so I kind of switched everything my senior year, added an econ major. I'm so far behind that I ended up getting an MBA instead. So I got an MBA in a year, and then I went and did a
At Sam
PhD.
Houston, or did you?
Yeah,
Okay.
no,
Okay.
yeah, the MBA is at Sam Houston as well. So I had good grades as an undergrad, so it was kind of a natural addition. And then I graduated during the recession, so I got my bachelor's in 2009. And so like
Okay.
realistically, like there were no internships the year before in 2008. So like it kind of
Yeah.
all pieced together, I think, really well.
It's a
So
good
I
time to
come
go back to school.
ready to go back to school at 22. Uh, so I think the stars kind of aligned at the right spot. There were no jobs for management majors, and I was doing something that I really liked, and so like it kind of worked out really well. If it was a good job market, maybe I wouldn't be an economist, but I just happened to graduate at a bad time in Houston.
Yeah. And then you went to Washington State for your
Yes,
PhD.
yeah. So all the way. So I go from Houston up to the Washington up to Eastern Washington.
Hmm.
Nice and snowy. I think I had a big dump of. Actually, I think when I visited in May, and it was actually snowing when I visited in May, and it just blew my mind because that was not something I was familiar with.
So, so,
So stayed
so
there for 4 years.
what made you pick Washington State? Because you're a Texas person, right? And
I
there's a
am
lot of great places closer to Texas than
very
Washington
close.
State. So how'd
And now
that choice happen?
that's exactly why I didn't do it because they
Okay.
were close to Texas. I wanted to get
Yeah.
away. I knew I needed
Okay.
something different.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that we highlight on this series is the experience that you get teaching at your PhD institution. So, how much teaching did you have before you graduated?
They are so Washington State is amazing when it comes to this. So let's see, I think my first class was 2 years after my second year. So I was
Okay.
there for 2 years. Then the summer after, they let me teach sports econ, and so I knew I kind of wanted to do sports economics. I was kind of trending in that area. They hadn't offered it in a while, and so I said that I would be willing to teach it, and they let me teach it. My first class had 12 students, I think, right, like
Okay.
a summer session.
Yeah.
So I taught in summer one. Really, as a grad student, I taught it because I wanted the extra pay.
Yeah.
I needed the money,
Needed
so I was like,
the
yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
And then right from then, my assistantship turned into a teaching assistantship. So I was a research assistant for 2 years, and then the last 2 years, I got to teach one class each semester as part of my assistantship, and then I still got to teach in the summer. So I had
Okay.
taught a couple sports econ a couple times, principles of
Hmm.
micro a couple times, and then in my very last year, the sports management program needed an adjunct professor, and my department said, "Yeah, he can do it. We trust him
Yeah.
to adjunct in your department while still being a PhD student."
Yeah. And what were your fields in the PhD program?
So for us, we only have a couple fields. Our program was pretty small.
Okay.
My fields are applied microeconomics, is kind of the catch-all for that,
Yeah.
and then environmental and natural resource economics. So I tried to pick the applied micro stuff as much as I could
The good
when I
stuff.
could. Yeah, the good stuff, right? Like I don't want to do
That might be
I
controversial,
didn't,
but the good stuff.
I didn't do trade. I didn't do
Yeah.
macro. Like we have an ag program, so ag was really big.
Yeah.
But applied micro and then environmental and natural resource.
Okay. And what was your job market year?
2014.
Okay, so
It would
we're
have been in
post recession
Philadelphia.
and budget
Post recession.
issues. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it would have been Philadelphia, but I didn't go. So
Okay.
I am one of the very few job. I think I'm one of the very few PhD people who I don't have that stereotypical job market Joe, all that experience.
Okay. And
I
how
took my
how
job
did that
early.
work out?
Luck,
Well,
I went to a teaching conference. I went to NEDA, the
okay.
National Economics Teaching Association. I never know
And
the
so
codes.
yes, you got
Yeah, NEDA.
it.
I went to NEDA,
And
and this was in
what city
Austin.
was it in that year? Austin?
Austin.
Okay. So
That's
back
why I
home.
went.
All
I
right.
wanted to go home. I met Wayne there.
Hmm.
So I met Wayne Geerling. We had talked. He said Penn State had an opening. I'm sure it was one of the 100 that I applied to.
Yeah.
But I guess because I had talked to Wayne, he then went back. He was at Penn State then. He then went
Hmm.
back and told his director and said, "Hey, this guy wants to teach. I saw him at a teaching conference. He can teach." And
Hmm.
then they interviewed me in October, maybe,
Okay.
or early November, October, and then they offered me the position right before Thanksgiving. So I had a whole Thanksgiving break to think about it,
Yeah.
and I was constantly just walking in circles. Like I tell my students it's the classic problem they have in economics. You could take a guaranteed job
Hmm.
or turn it down and go for a risk, and you may have better
Yeah.
jobs, but you don't know.
You had
And so
no
it
idea.
was. I obviously took it. So I took
Okay.
I took the guaranteed job, and I'm happy.
But the difference in this situation is had that happened today in your career
Mm-hmm.
after you've kind of defined who you are, the econ media person, it would be a totally different evaluation. But at that point, when you're graduating with your PhD, you truly don't fully know what you want to do for the rest of your life. You have an idea of your research interests or the areas, but you don't know what academia truly is. At least I didn't. Yeah.
No, and I always say I went to grad school to become a teacher. Like I knew that going in before, and then during grad school, I kind of found out what research was. I liked doing it. I had research projects. I liked presenting research, and then a job opportunity came up that said, "Here's teaching. Here's you can
Yeah.
do what you said you wanted to do." And so I dove into it, and I'm glad I did. But it was definitely during that time period, I was like, okay, well, I'm now fully a teacher. Like I'm not on a tenure track.
Hmm.
I'm taking all those risks, but I'm getting to do what I said I wanted to do. And so I've gotten better about not questioning it, but definitely during those first couple of years, I was like, is this the right move?
Yeah. The what ifs, right?
Yeah. Well, and actually, I think the worst part probably was because I accepted the job over Thanksgiving break. The places I would have interviewed hadn't actually reached out yet. I didn't know what opportunities there were. And then
Yeah.
I accepted the job. And then over the next couple of weeks, I would get an email that said, "We wanted to interview you. This
Yeah.
school wants to interview you. This school." And I'm like, I didn't know who these people were.
Yeah.
So it was very weird to get to. I still got to see who was interested at least in the interview process. So that was actually, I think, really nice that
Yeah.
I didn't have to like take my application down or anything like that.
Well, that is a very different path to a job than I think anybody that's been on this show has had. So now you're at Penn State, and this is year what?
Seven? I lose
Seven?
count. I finished in 2014 and it's
Yeah.
2021, so I'm going to call it 7 years.
Yeah. I'll go
I'm
with
real
that.
bad. I lose track.
So what is your official title? Let's go there at Penn State.
Sure. So I'm an associate teaching professor. So a couple of years ago, we switched titles away from lecturer and senior lecturer. We're now all teaching professors of some sort.
Okay. And how do you feel about that switch?
I like it. So I will definitely say I'm in the minority of people. I probably even shouldn't say minority. I don't actually know how other people feel about it. But I
Mhm.
know there's people who say, it doesn't matter. It's just a title. It's you're still a lecturer. You're still teaching. It doesn't really matter. But I I like it. I think it helps, especially talking to students because the students don't know.
Yeah.
They see some people who are I was still called professor even when I was a lecturer.
Hmm.
They don't know the difference, but I still have a PhD, and so a lot of it is like the role is important, and so I liked the switch.
Yeah.
Um, it gave us some levels. So before we only had two, now we have four.
Okay. So
So
there's.
we still start at lecturer, and so it's
Mhm.
lecturer, assistant, associate, full.
Okay.
But I've appreciated it. I like being able to write it on even just doing papers. It's nicer to write teaching professor. I think
Yeah.
it's a little more respectful than some of the other stuff I see.
From my perception of it is I like it. I like it because it's more of a buy-in, I guess I feel. And the term lecturer varies drastically what the responsibilities and the expectations are.
Yeah.
This one kind of sets a better expectation than lecturer in the market. And at the end of the day, when we where it really matters is when you go to conferences and people read, the title.
Yeah.
That's where it is, and it makes a difference there what your title
And
is.
I think that, for me, that's the part that I struggle with, is that it shouldn't make a difference, but I know that it makes a difference.
Yeah,
And so I'm glad that it's there because I know that it matters to other people. So
yeah,
it's nice to have that on.
yeah. No, that's a struggle that I have too. This whole idea of things that shouldn't matter, but they do matter. Like,
Mm-hmm.
right now there's the whole discussion of using doctor in your name or not. And I've struggled with that over years. I'm more about the casual aspect.
Yeah.
Abdullah Barani works well, but I understand that if I use Abdullah Barani, then I am not helping others that would benefit from the doctorate title. So I've changed my Twitter handles. Actually, I did it a year and a half ago to include doctor, and now I try to call everybody doctor where it applies. And I apologize. I actually introduced, when we talked, when we started this, I didn't say Dr. Wooten. So Dr. Wooten. Well, actually, I like Dr. J better. You and I had this conversation a couple of years ago via Twitter. It's Dr. J from now on.
If there wasn't a famous Dr. J already, I would probably
Yeah.
go by it. But I don't want to step on his toes. He's definitely the more famous one.
So at Penn State, year 7 or somewhere around there, and you're moving up the ranks. What do you teach? What are your
Yep.
responsibilities there?
That's, that's always a loaded question, right? It's technically teaching, right? So it's a teaching position. So we're required to teach 6 classes a year. So
Okay.
typically 3 and 3. We don't typically teach over the summer. No research requirements in terms of promotions or anything like that. Even though it looks good if you have them, you're not required to do them. And then that broad category of service, right? And
Mhm.
I think that's always the toughest part. And I think that's definitely what I was not prepared for when I took any job. Was the idea that I would be required to do stuff and I would be required to carve out time to these things, even though I'm judged on them, but I don't know how I'm judged on them. I'm just judged on doing them. I guess it's a
Okay.
lot easier to be judged on teaching.
Yeah.
So, I don't know the actual percentage breakdown.
Okay.
My understanding is it's heavy teaching, and
Mhm.
then we're supposed to also do some stuff if they ask us to do it. But
Okay.
so primarily teaching.
And what classes do you teach mostly there?
Every semester I teach labor economics. So I've taught labor 14 times. I don't whatever 7 times, right? 7 times 2. If it's
Yeah.
7,
Yeah.
this is my 14th time. But actually, I teach it more because I also teach it online. So I teach
Okay.
labor economics online and on campus. Every now and then I teach principles. So I consider myself a principles instructor, but I actually teach principles probably less often than some
Mhm.
of my other courses. And then I get to teach special topics every now and then. So economics of crime, natural resource economics. Those have happened kind of sprinkling, but labor is the big one, principles, and then some applied micro stuff.
Okay. And your micro is a large section, right?
Yeah. Well,
How many students?
yes, it is. It's large. I was gonna say I teach the large section at Penn State, but even my small section is a
Yeah,
large
it's a
section.
large. So
So
what is large at Penn State?
the large section is 723, I believe, is what the class holds.
Okay.
And they fill it. It's 723 every year. The small sections are between 290 and 330. So we usually
Okay.
just say the three. It's still big, right? But
Yeah.
for us, that's our small section. So
Sure.
we typically say 300 and 700 just to round them off.
Right. So you have all this amazing experiences teaching in class and a lot of experience doing it. What is your tip to educators? Like, if you could talk to graduate students today and give them some advice about how to approach teaching, what would it be?
Number one is to be yourself. That I think that was the hardest part. I think when I started, and even seeing people who struggle, there are people who don't do as well, and they try to come up with ways to get better, and they always want to imitate other people. They said, "Oh, well, I saw he did it this way, so I'm going to copy that. I'm going to do the same thing." And if it's not your style, it's going to show, and it's going to be very awkward in front of
Hmm.
students. And so I always try to tell people, like, look, if you don't like TV shows and movies, if you don't like it, don't squeeze it in just because it works for somebody else. If you don't like bringing in news articles, if you don't like students writing papers, don't make your students write papers. Come up with something else. So a lot of it is just being yourself. I'm real nerdy in the classroom. Like I've owned it.
Okay.
I think when I first started, I tried to be like very professional. I'm like, I'm gonna not bring my personality in.
Yeah.
Now I'm at the point where like I'll wear Converse every now and then.
Hmm.
I talk about goofy stuff that I'm into. I let my personality show. I just try to be myself. I try to be authentic, not act like anybody else. And I can still be serious and professional when I need to be, but I try to have fun when I can.
So, this is a even bigger question, and it's maybe a little bit too much for this conversation. But how do you find out who you are actually? I mean, I assume it would require some sort of experimentation,
Mm-hmm.
and what people might consider failures in the classroom. Uh, did you have any experiences where you're like, oh shoot, this this backfired. I'll never do this
Yeah.
again.
Yes. Yeah. I remember this. This is a dark day of teaching. Um, it was my worst semester teaching ever.
Okay.
I think it was my second year. It was so like the first year went well. Like I'd never taught labor before, but I come in, I teach labor. I was happy with it. My second year, I was allowed to teach labor, and then they also let me teach principles, a micro course.
Okay.
And the labor course was an absolute disaster. Like it was 8 o'clock in the morning. All kinds of things were going wrong. Just an absolute awful semester. Like so bad that I was coming in 2 minutes before class started, set up, teach, and immediately leave. Like I wasn't
Yeah.
trying to talk to students. And there was I don't remember the exact specifics, but there was a homework due. And I remember I required my students to type their homeworks. They couldn't handwrite them.
Okay.
They had to type them and they had to physically print them and they had to turn them in by 8 a.m. And I remember being in my office maybe like 10 or 15 minutes before class started and I started to get emails. And then I
Hmm.
started to get the ding, ding. I go, this isn't good.
Yeah.
Anytime you get those back to back dings, that's never a good sign. The printers on campus had gone down that morning.
Oh wow.
And like in my mind, it's 8 o'clock in the morning, right? So I'm
Should have
kind
done
of
it the night before, type of
see,
thing.
I was a snobby
Yeah.
recent grad. I was arrogant. So in my
Yeah.
mind, I go, this is what you get. You should have
Hmm.
printed it the night before. You shouldn't be waiting until the day it's due. Right? Like that's the story I told myself. And I walked into the classroom, and that was the story I told. I walked in, and somebody walked up and said, "I don't know if you know this, but," I go, "I don't care. I don't want to hear it. You should
Yeah.
have done this beforehand." Um, and I went with it. Right? And like
Hmm. That was the policy.
that was the policy, and that's what we had been taught. We had been taught you
Yeah.
have to be strict. You can't bend. Like it's just little things like that where I think uh, that was an awful semester. Just all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff happening. At the same time, I taught my first principles course, and that course was amazing. And it
Hmm.
was one of those I was dreading going to one, but I loved being in the other. And then I
Yeah.
realized that I was being more of myself in front of the freshmen. Um,
Hmm.
I was I wasn't necessarily relaxed, but I was more comfortable in front of them. I was like terrified to be in front of
Yeah.
the other ones, and that's kind of where I realized like I wasn't probably should change the way I was approaching classes.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point, especially with what's been happening, the pandemic and all. The idea of rigid policies, and I understand that, for some of us it's easier to maneuver around the policies, and for others it's a little bit difficult. But coming out of college, out of my PhD program, I was one of those people too, where it's like, hey, this is the deadline. It's 8 o'clock. You should have
Mm-hmm.
done it yesterday. And with time, I recognize that life happens, right? And there's lessons there for students. Now, I am one of those people that I'll never curve, right? There's no curve there's no extra credit that is not previously, on the,
That was the only semester I ever curved.
yeah.
It was also my worst semester, and I regret it. It
Yeah.
didn't sit right with me. I was like, why am I curt? Like I didn't
Yeah,
do anything wrong. It was just,
exactly.
yeah.
So there's some policies that I will stick with, but there's also some policies, and the pandemic has highlighted them, that they just exist to make life difficult for people.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
it's important for us to take a step back and evaluate what policies really matter, which ones are we just sticking to just to create a hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and that has helped, I think, a lot. Where you really exactly what you said. You sit and you look at each policy and you say, okay, I have it due at this time. Why did I pick this time?
Yeah.
Is that the right time? I'm making them turn it in this way, this way, this way, this way. Are we
Yeah.
just checking boxes to make it easier for me to grade? Or do those actually have some kind of policy associated with it? And I've gotten better. I still don't allow late work. I mean, it's
Yeah.
even though I watched that happen, um, I think I've done a better job of framing why that policy exists. Um,
Hmm.
so, for example, we have discussion boards, and their posts are due by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday.
Yeah.
But the site goes down an hour before, um, and they want an extension because they
Yeah.
waited till right before. And I kind of talk to them. I say, if the website had gone down on a Wednesday at 2 p.m. for an
Hmm.
hour, you wouldn't ask for an extension.
Yeah.
You have a whole week, and I've done a better job of kind of framing why those exist.
Yeah.
The point of a discussion board is that you're having a discussion that week.
Yeah.
If we extend it into next week, you're now kind of overlapping discussions that aren't matching.
Yeah.
And so I think I've gotten better at framing it of just kind of why those policies exist.
Yeah.
But that semester, I took a hard line, and I probably shouldn't have.
Yeah. No, and yeah, I realized I was doing that too. So to develop flexibility in my classes, but still allow the expectation is I allow people to drop, with discussion boards or assignments that are frequent low stake assignments. Um, what turns out to be 2 out of 16, whatever that percentage is, right? And this gives them like, hey, I understand life happens sometimes. You don't need to come asking me for a pass, but the rest you better meet the expectation, and that allows for both best of both worlds. At
Yeah.
least I think so. But every policy has pros and cons. There's always trade-offs.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that your position at Penn State does not require you to do any research. But I've been looking at your past year or past couple of years actually, and from a publication standpoint, you've kind of killed it. We could
Yeah.
say that, right? So one, um, why so much research, and then two, you know, give us an insight about what are your numbers, what are your highlights? What's the highlight reel look like?
Right. If I had to pick people or pick topics,
Yeah.
I think I'm going to brag on you a little bit here. The past couple years, I've gotten good co-authors. Where in the beginning, I was trying to figure out grad school, trying to figure out how to be a professor first, how to teach this many classes, manage those things. So my first couple years out was just gaps.
Hmm.
And then I settled in. We had the Bazinganomics Big Bang Theory paper that came together relatively easily. I think that could be my top publication right now, I think, in terms of citations. And then I realized it's not too bad. It just requires a lot of time management.
Yeah.
And then you helped with the pipeline. You kind of taught me your Excel spreadsheet pipeline idea. And that has been incredibly helpful in terms of just kind of managing the flow of stuff. I think when I was first doing it, I was working on a project at a time.
Yeah.
And then it would just get bunched up. And then I wouldn't ever get but like one or two things out. And one or two things, I think, for most people is actually really good.
Yeah.
I
I was going to say that. Yeah.
When I say that, right, like one or two things is still very good. And then I think once you kind of got me in that pipeline idea of working on multiple projects at once, that's a lot of where this is coming from.
Yeah.
Where I have some really good co-authors who are doing, they're doing their parts during different times than I'm doing my parts. And so then as a result, I just start pumping out like 4 and 5 things a year rather than 1 or 2. It doesn't feel like I'm doing that much stuff. It really doesn't. Like I look at my list and I go, oh my God, I need to slow down. I need to see some of these. but I think it's good timing, good co-authors. I think that's probably the biggest
Yeah.
piece of why I've been able to publish so much.
Yeah, no, time management is super important. The pipeline idea really stemmed from a conversation I had with a colleague of mine at Northern Kentucky University, and the advice she gave me, I had come from a position where I was at for 3 years on a tenure track, and I had zero publications. It was teaching heavy, and I was like, I need to get my research career started, and I have no idea how to do it. I have zero publications. I have one paper that I could submit for review, and she told me to think about it as having three papers in every phase, right? And so even the ideation phase, you need like three ideas because they kind of dwindle as you go on. But that always keeps the pipeline going. And as soon as I got tenure, the first thing I said is, I can't have my pipeline go dry because I don't want to be one of those people that got tenure and never published again. So,
Yeah.
yeah. No,
I,
but
I always have ideas, right? I think that's the biggest thing is I kind of, if I had to, yes, I overcommit,
mhm.
for sure. I message people and I say, hey, I got an idea. Do you want to do this? And then my
Yeah,
hope is that they wait a couple months and then they come back and check in with me.
yeah,
Though I think the worst part is when they go, yeah, let's do it. And I'm like, I've
right
already
now.
other people.
Yeah,
So anytime I have a co-author who says like, I need another week or so to review this, I'm like, please take it. Please take
yeah.
another week. Please
No,
don't.
I'm definitely at that point in my career, and it sounds pompous, but I'm not trying to be that. It's I have more ideas than I have time, and it's like I want to work with other people that kind of help execute, or actually a big part of what I'm trying to do these days is uh, play the mentorship role. So recent graduates that are interested in my field, can we work together and build the pipeline together?
Yeah,
So,
I've done that. So I found there was a graduate student at UNC. She's going to be mad at me because I don't know. It's Greensboro, um,
okay.
who had reached out last year and said, "Hey, I'm using the Econ Media Library. I've got these things." And so she was more just thanking me of just like, thanks for having the website. And I
Yeah.
was like, hey, why don't we write a paper over what you're
Yeah.
doing? You're doing good things I can add in. And I've tried to take a more kind of mentor type role of like, here's how we're going to lay it out. Hey, here's the review. Here's the response to reviewers. I've already laid this out for you. Do you want to look at it? That
Yeah.
way she can kind of see what that process is like behind the scenes. But no, I think so. Our publication has a revise and resubmit. And the bulk of it is hers. Like she had come up with a lot of the ideas, and I kind of
Hmm.
just helped like place it. But even I think last year at Southerns, I ran into two graduate students from George Mason who had
Hmm.
found a really cool episode of Have Gun Will Travel and could connect it with externalities, but like they didn't know what to do. That was their presentation. They go, "We have this great media clip. What do we do with it?"
Yeah.
They were looking for ideas, and so then I got to kind of come in and say, "I got it. Let me help."
Yeah.
And so I got to kind of fill in those pieces, but same idea, right? They're graduate students. One's a third year, one's a fourth year. Of just
Hmm.
showing them where it's going, and then that's been accepted at Journal of Private Enterprise.
Yeah.
So it fits nicely with what they're doing, and it's been a kind of a real treat to see that side of it because I remember what it was like. Nobody was helping me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know even how to pick a journal,
No,
right? So, so
AER,
and
right? Like let me put this at AER, and then I work my
exactly.
way down.
Now that role of mentorship role has become more and more important for me these days, where I feel like it's my duty to pass it on,
Yeah.
and then also work with. One of my goals for 2021 is more collaborations. So
Mhm.
I'm tired of working on things in silos and
Yeah.
just trying to expand as much as possible. What are your 2021 goals?
I need to slow down. I really need to slow down. But I think I tell myself that every single year.
Yeah.
Um, I just submitted the book for the Parks and Recreation and Economics book in
Okay.
the fall. I think it's going to be published this summer. After talking to some people who have done those books before, I think I want to make sure I do a pretty good job of selling that book, of
Yeah.
just like, of not publishing something and just letting it get sat behind.
Yeah.
I think that's always the struggle with, especially a lot of the research papers that we do. We publish it and then move on. It's, hey, look, I did this work, and what's next?
Yeah.
And Colleen and I created the website as a real resource. I took the time to write the book as a resource. And so I want to make sure that those resources are actually, people are hearing about them, people know about them. So I think really kind of, I guess, better selling all the work I've already done to make sure that it's not just kind of just sitting there.
No, that's really important. And as academics, we're not taught on how to sell our work, and some people would even be upset that we're using the term "sell" here.
Yeah.
But marketing what we do, and really the only way that I was taught to market was to go to conferences, and it wasn't presented as marketing; it was presented as getting feedback.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, and if first of all, the book you said sometime this spring, summer.
Summer. I think the goal is summer.
Okay.
I have a list, but I've got the stages list. I think their goal is the summer.
Okay. Well, we'll look for it in the summer, and we'll help market it and share it with everybody else. So that is a book based on your econ media personality or background.
Yeah.
What about the website? You have an amazing website too.
Man, that thing has exploded.
Yeah.
I used media when I was a grad student, so I don't even remember. I think I still have all my slides from whenever I was a grad student. There were clips, but I would like load it into YouTube and play it. I had maybe like a clip for every chapter. And then when I first started teaching, students were like, "Hey, I want to watch those clips again. Can you give them to me?" And I go, "Well, I can't send you the clips. Like they're too big." So I created just like a really plain, basic WordPress site to put the clips that I was already using on the website. And that's originally 2014. Like that's all it was. I think I've got that in there. I think I've got established 2014. That's all it was. It was, here are the clips I've used. Here's students. You can go to this website to see it. And then, I would change a clip out. So I was teaching and I go, I don't like this clip anymore. I found a better clip. And I would add a clip, or I'd add two clips. And then I kept adding and kept growing. And then I realized like, hey, other people can use this as well. Yeah. And I think that's really kind of where, if I had to guess, it probably kicked off in 2016. Okay. Is really whenever it got, I think, the most attention. And that's when I started to actually like collect clips. So I collected a bunch of clips 2016, and then 2018 it was published in JEE, and then it's just taken off. I think there's 550 clips on there. There's a lot.
Wow. And what's the website?
Econ Media Library. There's a couple ways you can do there. So econmedialibrary.com is the easy, I would say the normal way to go. The fancy way to go is econ.video.
Okay. That's how I get to it.
Yeah, I go to econ.video, but people get confused because there's no .com. So they're like, where's the rest of the URL? And I go, no, .video is the end of it.
Yeah. And so I'm sure you spent some time on the back end analytics, and I'm going to quiz you here. How many visits do you get usually?
You don't have to quiz me. I can tell you for sure. It's a lot. So I will say it's grown every single year, which I think has been, for me, the part that's really nice is knowing that it's getting used, because I can see where people are coming from. And I think one of the really cool things is I can see like if they're clicking on it from Canvas from another university, for example, I can see it hidden by the URL. So I can see when people are like assigning it for classes and stuff like that. So, last year, 2020 was the highest views I've had. There were 75,000 views of the website. Wow. Or pages on the website. And then that came from about 32,000 visitors. So which makes sense, like people are typically going to 2 clips. So they're going to the homepage, finding something. So far this year, there's 1,000. So we're 7 days in. I've got 1,000 views.
That's pretty good.
All over the world, all kinds of stuff. It's neat to see though.
So the entrepreneurship side, you have that. I kind of have the entrepreneurship side. Do you have any plans on what they call scaling it?
Yeah, the site does have a store feature, so
Okay.
I've bounced back and forth, and I'm gonna go right now with no, partly
Hmm.
because right, like, these are supposed to be educational in nature, and as soon as you start selling anything, you start kind of blurring that line between what's fair use for education versus
Yeah.
selling these clips for stuff.
Hmm.
The closest is probably a book, maybe a book on
Yeah.
how to teach with it. But no, honestly, maybe I'm a bad economist. I put in all this work. Happy to give it away for free.
Yeah.
Um,
Or a great educator.
or
Depends on how how
yeah,
you think of it.
we'll go with great
No,
educator.
no, yeah. So, I mean, there's monetizing it, and then there's also scaling it. So, right.
Yeah.
So, from 75,000 views,
Uh,
how do you get it to 1 million views?
I,
Or is
you know,
that something like on your
it's not even
radar?
something on my radar. I'm
Yeah.
telling you, I'm shocked that this is going to sound. Maybe this sounds disingenuous at first, but like a little part. I think you've heard me say this. I don't think this is that special. Like I don't get it. I don't get why people are coming here.
It's a great
I'm
resource. I mean, you've curated so many videos, and not only that, it's also by topic. It's
yeah.
so many different tags to go through. So, if an educator believes in using media to break up lecture or to reinforce a concept, it should be the number one place to go to, at least from my
Yeah.
perspective. But I might be biased.
No, and I think it's some of the stuff we talked about in terms of selling our research, right? Like I
Hmm.
published this in JEE, and I kind of walked away, and I
Yeah,
said like, all right, it's published. I did it. I'm done. I
yeah.
still put stuff on the website,
Hmm.
but I don't go out to universities and I don't do like lecture series on teaching with
Yeah,
media. I
yeah.
feel bad presenting the same topic at more than like two conferences. So if I
Yet there are people that present the same topic 12 times a year, right?
Yeah, right.
So,
It's kind of like what you said though, right? Like conferences are for getting feedback, not
hmm,
necessarily pitching your work.
yeah,
And so when it comes to the Econ Media Library, I've already gotten my feedback. I've done the
yeah,
things that needed to be done, and at this point, I think I'm trying to do a better job. So like whenever there's teaching specific conferences, I try to pitch how do you teach with media? I try to do more of those, but
yeah,
it feels I feel bad for doing it because I feel like I'm getting credit for something I've already done, and it doesn't. I guess in the academia sense, it doesn't sit right that I'm
yeah.
presenting published work when I should be presenting something new.
Yeah. So I'll challenge that perception a bit, and what I will say is I think what you are providing a professional development
Mm-hmm.
aspect where there's a lot of educators that especially in economics that their method of teaching is lecture, and there's nothing wrong with lecture, but you have to break up the lecture from time to
Yeah.
time. And I, as a graduate student or starting off my career, I replicated what I saw earlier generations of economists do, and I didn't know that using media was even an option until Dirk Mateer came to the University of Kentucky's uh, teaching workshop. I was like, yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
use music before I, go into class, and I'm like, this is such a simple idea, right? Like you just said, but it's more in line with my personality. Let me see how I could utilize it. And then it gets you thinking in a creative way of connecting what you see yourself to what's in your classroom. So I wouldn't think of it as, hey, I'm pitching my research again. I
Mm-hmm.
would think of it as I am telling future or other educators that there's a different way, and
Yeah.
what we see from the surveys on teaching in economics is we need to be talking more about the different ways to teach economics.
Yeah, that's really where I continue to present them are at conferences that have a professional development component. So Academy of Economics and Finance has their teaching workshop. I'll
Yeah.
always present there. Robert Morris has a teaching one, but a lot of it is those sadly are not well attended. Um,
Hmm.
the teaching sessions just aren't a big focus, and I think that's probably the biggest hurdle is
Yeah.
knowing how many people are out there who want to do a good job. Like a lot of professors want to teach well, but they just don't have the capacity or the time or energy to go sit in an hour-long session
Yeah.
on teaching methods. And
Yeah.
I think that's probably the biggest hurdle is getting that to be an acceptable way that we spend our time as educators, researchers, is learning how to teach.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your efforts with Econ Media Library or Econ dot video, and we'll link to this and show a couple of screenshots. If you have a favorite clip after this, send it to me, and I'll make sure
Okay.
that we show it. And uh, so, how do you get all these clips? Are you watching all of this media?
No,
Okay.
I don't, because you're sitting there thinking like, okay, I'm going to ask him about books next. So I got to
Yeah.
figure out how is he reading that much and watching TV?
Yeah.
No, well,
Yes and no.
yes and no. No, I did not come up with all these. So I'm very good about if somebody tells me about a clip, right? Their name is going to be at the bottom. This came from
Okay.
so and so. In the beginning, yes, it was me.
Mhm.
I was watching popular television shows.
Yeah.
And we'd watch it. I'd find one, and then I'd clip it. A couple of years ago, it was really kind of student driven. I
Okay.
had an assignment in class that said, "Hey, find a video clip that's not on the website. It's not on Dirk's website." You have to be careful because if you tell students to do something, they'll go find somebody who's already found it. Some of them.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I had the criteria. Go find something, and then really honestly, over the past 2 years or so, it's all been submissions from other people. I've
Okay.
had really great people just send me, whatever they're watching, they'll send it. Students will send me stuff. They know that I use a lot of media, so whatever they're watching, they send me stuff. So I would say the past 2 years or so, I have come up with very few for the site because most of my attention has been on like singular TV shows.
Yeah. Well, that's really exciting that it's community driven as well.
Mhm.
So if you're watching this and you have a favorite clip that you use to teach economics, send it to Jadrian. He'll put it up
Yeah.
on his website, give you credit for the idea as well, because credit does matter. Um, so this is a great segue to what I think is probably the most impressive. How do I put this? Uh,
I don't think it's that
Challenge
impressive.
goal.
No.
It's super impressive because a couple of years ago I was like, all right, Jadrian could do this. I'm gonna try to do this, and I think I made it till May,
Okay.
and I was meeting. I'm not gonna say what it is yet. I was meeting the challenge up until May, and then May I fell off and I didn't get anywhere near the goal that I had.
I remember you
So
tweeting me each time you would hit. You'd like, I did it
yeah.
again. I got another one.
So and then I went silent because I'm super disappointed by the fact that I couldn't accomplish it. But it is um, a big thing. So tell the audience what we were talking about.
I will definitely say, in terms of anytime I have to give a speech or anytime somebody introduces me, as soon as they find this out, this is always their lead off. This is
Really?
here's everything he does, right? You already heard that I publish 4 to 5 times a year, and that
Yeah,
I teach classes of 700 people, and then it's always, oh yeah, by the way, he also reads 52 books a year,
that is
um,
crazy.
which 52 is my goal. The past 2 years, I've gotten to 80. I think I got to 81 last year, and I think it was 82 the year before.
That is
Uh,
so impressive. I mean, how do you do it? So I'm sure there's people watching this that are like, productivity folks that, how do you crush your goals and how do you do it?
okay, so it's it's time management. Let's go back. We can go back 20 minutes. It's time management. My students will do the same thing. As soon as my students find out about it, like it takes them a couple of weeks, and then somebody finds my Goodreads profile
Yeah.
um, and says something about it. So it really is purely time management. Um, I read about 30 minutes to an hour in the morning. So I wake up, I have my coffee, and I just sit there. I'm going to go on the lower end and say 30 minutes because that's probably a more. Now that we work at home, I wake up right before I go to work.
Okay.
So 30 minutes in the morning. I lay down and go to bed 30 minutes to an hour at night. It really depends on how good the book is. So the way I always phrase it is in about 30 minutes. I'm not a speed reader. I read I can read maybe 20 pages in 30 minutes. So 20 pages in the morning, 20 pages at night. That puts you about 40 pages a day. And then if you go for a whole week, that puts you at 280 pages, which is about one book. So it doesn't require, it requires 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes at night. That's how I get to 52 books a year. The way that you get to 81 books is you don't go 30 minutes, you go 45 minutes.
Gotcha.
You take a couple hours on a Saturday. What really helped was all the flights. When we were going to conferences and stuff, I basically had a 2-hour, 3-hour read fest because I can't use my phone. So I could just read my way through it.
Gotcha.
So no, 52 is not bad. It's 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night. I don't work out. So people who work out and run have that mindset. I just do it with books.
Gotcha. Well, it sounds so manageable when you present it that way. We're day 7 of 2021. I have read 0 books. What are you currently reading?
I finished my first one yesterday. Yesterday I read Bluebird by Attica Locke. It was a really good book. It's about a murder in East Texas. So it's the part of Texas that I'm from. So it was a really, I was drawn to it from the Texas component. And then right now I'm about halfway done with The Boy from the Woods. And actually, you know what? I take the pipeline approach to reading as well. I don't read one book at a time. I typically have I have a couple books ready to go and I'll read a couple books at a time. I typically read like maybe 6 or 7 books at a time.
Wow.
I'm in like some weird part, right? Diminishing returns, right? So
I totally understand it.
And I only read a little bit, then I come back. It's like a TV show. So Bluebird was the one that I finished, and then Boy from the Woods right now is what I'm reading. So I'm going to try to do more fiction this year. Last year I did a lot of nonfiction.
Yeah, that's another thing I was going to point out. I mean, your Goodreads profile indicates that it's a very diverse, eclectic collection of books, and I applaud you for that. Jadrian, I don't know if you've noticed, but we've gone longer than an hour. This was a really exciting conversation. Got to know you. I've known you for years, and I got to know a different side of you. So thank you for bringing that energy and excitement. And I wish you an amazing 2021 where you get to slow down a little bit.
Well, maybe, right?
Maybe.
I always say that in January.
Yeah.
I'll in June and I'll see what I say.
Once again, thank you and Happy New Year. Thank you for watching. Make sure to check out these other videos. If you haven't done it already, subscribe. See you next week on Coffee with Dr. A.